A powerful black CEO, Amara Caldwell, begins receiving cryptic threats that pierce the carefully controlled life she's built. She hires a mysterious bodyguard, Kade Mercer, whose unsettling familiarity hints at a shared past she can't quite recall. As surveillance closes in and hidden dangers circle her company and home, Kade reveals long-buried truths about a childhood fire that shaped her life, and the possibility that it was no accident. Together they uncover links to her father's corrupt former partner, a vanished child, and a conspiracy that has awakened after decades of silence, forcing Amara to confront the past she thought she escaped. Night pressed against the glass walls of Helix Tower, turning the city below into a restless sea of lights. Inside the top-floor boardroom, CEO Amara Caldwell stood alone, her reflection fractured across the dark windows like a woman split by too many secrets. A storm brewed in her chest, one she had tried to ignore for months. She had built her empire by anticipating danger, by calculating risks before they ever touched her doorstep. But tonight felt different. Tonight the danger was personal, invisible, and uncomfortably close. Threats had slithered into her private life, anonymous messages, veiled warnings, unexplained shadows tracing her path. Someone wanted her rattled. Someone wanted access to the truth she guarded. So she did what she had never done before. She hired a personal bodyguard. Quiet, discreet, highly recommended by a retired federal contact she trusted. His name was Kade Mercer. A man with no social trail, no vanity, no noise attached to him. Just a sparse file and a whisper of a reputation. He saw everything. She had expected a hardened brute, someone whose presence alone could anchor her nerves. Instead, when the elevator doors opened that morning and Kade stepped out, she found herself facing a man carved from stillness. Broad-shouldered. Expression unreadable. Eyes dark, steady, almost too observant. The kind of man who did not need to look dangerous to be dangerous. He didn't shake her hand. He didn't offer a smile. He simply nodded once, as if acknowledging something he already knew about her. That subtle certainty unsettled her more than any threat lurking beyond the tower's glass walls. Throughout the day, he shadowed her with silent precision. Every corridor, every meeting, every elevator descent into the parking levels where her nerves coiled the tightest. Amara often forgot he was there until she caught the faint shift of his posture, the subtle tilt of his head, registering details she could not perceive. And yet, something about him felt familiar. Not his face. Not his voice, which had barely stretched beyond short, functional replies. No, something deeper, something she could not name, tugged at her memory like an unfinished chord. By late afternoon, the building's shadows stretched long and thin. Her security chief briefed her on rising concerns, unusual data pings near her home network, unknown vehicles circling her gated community, a break-in attempt at a property she owned under a shell name. Kade listened without interrupting, arms folded, jaw still. When the chief left, Kade remained. The room felt smaller with just the two of them, as if the air thickened around truths unwilling to stay buried. He studied her with a calm that bordered on certainty, then said something unexpected. "You're not telling them everything." The words hooked beneath her ribs. No one spoke to her like that, not employees, not partners, not even friends she scarcely had time for. She opened her mouth to respond, but Kade continued before she could shape a denial. "Someone isn't after your company," he said quietly. "They're after you. And people don't hunt CEOs without knowing who they are underneath the title." There it was, the thing she feared most, the suggestion that someone might know her beyond the polished surface she presented to the world. Few understood how much she had sacrificed to build a life defined by control. Fewer still knew where those sacrifices had begun. She didn't answer him. Instead, she walked toward the window, letting the glow of the city wash across her face as if it could hide the shift in her breathing. Behind her, Kade remained silent, but his silence felt intentional, as though he was giving her space to lie or to tell the truth. Finally, she murmured, "My life before Helix, it's complicated." It was the first crack in the armor she had worn for decades. And though the words hung fragile in the room, Kade didn't press her. He simply said, "I know." Her pulse stuttered. How could he know anything? Their histories were not supposed to intersect. Her past was buried under layers of reinvention and sealed records. Yet something in his tone held the weight of familiarity, almost recognition. Before she could question him, her phone buzzed. A new anonymous message. No text, just a photo. Her office. Taken from somewhere inside the building. Taken within the last few minutes. Amara felt her throat tighten as she handed the phone silently to Kade. His jaw hardened. No hesitation. No surprise. As if he had expected this escalation. He stepped closer to her, lowering his voice to a tone that threaded certainty through the rising panic around them. We need to leave this floor. Now. As he guided her toward the private exit, Amara glanced once more at the dark glass towering over the city. For the first time, she felt watched not by an enemy, but by the ghost of the life she had left behind. And somewhere inside that reflection, buried in the shadows, a terrible suspicion flickered. Kade Mercer did not just know how to protect her. He knew her. He led her through the quiet hallway toward the service stairwell, every step echoing like a countdown she hadn't realized had started long ago. The moment the door shut behind them, muffling the hum of the executive floor, Amara felt her composure slipping. This wasn't just a threat, it was someone reaching into the most guarded corners of her identity. As they descended, Kade moved with a familiarity that unsettled her, as though he already understood how fear shaped her thoughts, how silence pressed against her ribs, how secrets weighed heavier than any danger outside the building. When they reached the landing, he paused, turning toward her with an expression that finally cracked the mask he wore. Not pity. Not concern. Something more complicated. Something haunted. I should have told you earlier, he said softly. This isn't the first time I've protected you. Amara froze, realizing his confession carried the weight of a history she couldn't remember yet. The stairwell hummed with a faint echo of machinery, a hollow metallic rhythm that seemed to pulse in sync with Amara's heartbeat. Kade stood a step below her, the low light cutting along the edges of his face like a sculptor's blade, revealing an expression too careful to be casual. His words, "This isn't the first time I've protected you," hung in the narrow space, trembling between past and present like a bridge she wasn't ready to cross. She swallowed hard, her voice barely forming as she whispered, "What are you talking about?" Kade didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the stairwell as if the shadows themselves were threats, then motioned for her to follow. They descended the final flight, their footsteps a soft synchronized urgency. When they reached the service corridor, he paused again, the tension around him sharpening. "We can't stay here. Not while they know your location. I'll explain when we're secure." His tone carried a finality she'd never heard directed at her, not from employees, not from partners, not from anyone who dared speak with such authority. He led her through a maze of industrial hallways, past humming generators and locked utility rooms. The building's underbelly felt colder, harsher, stripped of the elegance that cloaked the executive floors. Here, the fluorescent lights flickered like nervous glances, and the concrete walls held a faint scent of dust and metal. Amara followed closely, each step a reminder that she was no longer in control of her own narrative. She hated that feeling, that quiet helplessness, but something deeper inside her pulsed with a strange familiarity, as though Kade's presence stirred an old instinct she hadn't felt in years. They emerged into the sub-basement garage, the air tinged with gasoline and distant echoes. Kade raised a hand, signaling her to stay behind him as he scanned the rows of shadowed vehicles. "Someone's been here recently," he murmured. "Dust patterns are disturbed. Fresh footprints." Amara didn't see what he saw, but she felt the truth ripple across her skin. Whoever had taken that photo of her office was close. Too close. Kade guided her toward a nondescript SUV, black, unmarked, clearly prepared in advance. He opened the rear door for her, locking eyes with her as she hesitated. That gaze, steady, dark, almost mournful, tilted something inside her memory. A sensation, not an image. A voice telling her to run. Large hands lifting her. A night filled with flashing red lights. She blinked hard, trying to grasp the fraying thread, but it slipped through her mind before she could hold it. "Kade," she said softly as she slid into the car. "How could you have protected me before if we've never met?" Silence stretched between them for a beat too long. He closed the door. The lock clicked like a final note in a forgotten song. As he rounded the SUV and got behind the wheel, he exhaled slowly. "You were very young. And it wasn't my job then." The engine rumbled to life, filling the garage with a steady vibration. Amara leaned forward, gripping the headrest in front of her. "Young? How young?" Are you telling me we have a past? Kade kept his eyes on the exit ramp, but something in his jaw tightened. You don't remember, he said, not judging, simply stating a fact. You wouldn't. And you weren't supposed to. The ramp opened onto the night, and the city's glow washed across the windshield in broken beams. Amara felt a rush of air leave her lungs as they merged into traffic. Kade, stop speaking in riddles. If you know something about my past, you need to tell me. Her voice cracked at the edges, not with fear, but with something more volatile, the frustration of a woman who had spent her life burying ghosts that suddenly seemed intent on rising. Kade's hands tightened on the wheel. Your past isn't a riddle, he said. It's a wound. One someone is trying to reopen. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. I was there the night it happened. Amara's breath stilled. The city lights streaked past in thin luminous lines, but everything inside the car went unbearably still. Memories trembled at the edge of her consciousness, a siren's wail, a shattered window, a woman's scream swallowed by darkness. She closed her eyes, steadying herself. You're talking about the fire, she whispered. Kade nodded once, the movement small yet weighted. Yes. The fire at your childhood home. Amara pressed her fingers to her temples. She rarely spoke of that night, even to herself. It was the origin of everything she had become, her resilience, her ambition, her unyielding need to control every inch of her life. It was also the night she lost nearly everything. How could you have been there? She whispered. You would have been a child yourself. Kade hesitated, choosing his words with the precision of a man who understood the fragility of truth. My father was the first responder on scene. I went with him that night, a mistake he never forgave himself for. But I saw you. I saw them pull you out. The SUV moved through the city like a silent vessel, but inside Amara felt a storm gathering, old embers sparking to life. She forced herself to meet his eyes in the mirror. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Because, he said quietly, every file about that night is sealed, and someone is trying to unseal them. He signaled, turning abruptly onto a narrower road lined with warehouses. Whoever is threatening you now isn't interested in Astra Helix. They're interested in the truth of that night. Amara stared at the passing buildings, their faceless exteriors reflecting the hollow spaces within her memory. And you think they believe I know something? Kade didn't answer immediately. I think, he said slowly, they believe someone connected to that night survived who shouldn't have. The words sank into her like stones dropped into deep water. She felt the weight of them, the implication threading cold through her spine. Kade, she whispered, what aren't you telling me? He glanced at her, not with the detachment of a bodyguard, but with the haunted recognition of someone who had carried her story far longer than she ever knew. The fire wasn't an accident, he said. And the person who started it was never caught. The warehouse district unfolded before them like a forgotten spine of the city. Long, skeletal buildings hunched beneath the orange glow of flickering street lamps. The SUV's tires whispered over uneven pavement as Kade guided it into the shadowed backlit of an abandoned freight depot. The moment he killed the engine, silence swelled in the space between them, thick, expectant, electric with truths waiting to breach the surface. Amara exhaled slowly, steadying herself. If the fire wasn't an accident, then why hide that from me? Why would anyone bury something so important? Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from the unraveling of a narrative she'd clung to for decades. She had built her life on the belief that tragedy was random, that loss could be outrun if one worked hard enough, controlled enough, became powerful enough. Now, the foundation cracked beneath her. Kade stepped out of the SUV without answering, scanning the lot with methodical vigilance. When he opened her door, his expression was unreadable, carved in that same disciplined stillness she had noticed the moment she met him. Inside, he said, nodding toward a narrow entrance partially concealed by a rusting metal awning. It's safe. For now. Amara hesitated. Not because she doubted the space, but because she doubted her own ability to withstand whatever truth he was preparing to reveal. Still, she followed him. The air was cold and metallic, carrying the faint smell of dust and old machinery. Inside the warehouse, Kade locked the door behind them, then moved with practiced efficiency, checking corners, scanning shadows, confirming exits. His every movement radiated the tension of someone who had lived in vigilance far longer than she had known him. A single hanging bulb illuminated the center of the room. Beneath it, a wooden table held a small stack of files, a thermos, and a worn duffel bag. This was no spur-of-the-moment hideout. This was prepared, planned. The realization tightened something deep in her chest. "Kade," she said softly, "how long have you been watching me?" He froze, just for a fraction of a second, but enough for her to feel the truth settle in the space between them. Slowly, he turned. "I haven't been watching you," he answered. "I've been watching the people watching you." She didn't know whether to be relieved or unsettled. "Start from the beginning," she demanded. "Tell me what you know about the fire." Kade approached the table, sliding one of the files toward her. "First, understand this. I didn't know you'd grow up to become Amara Caldwell, CEO of Helix. When I was a kid, all I knew was that there was a girl in that burning house, and that someone wanted her gone." Amara's breath hitched. The memory of smoke clawing at her lungs flickered through her mind, the heat, the collapsing beams, the distant shouting. Her therapist once told her that the brain protects children from trauma by blurring edges, softening details. But some memories refused to fade. Kade continued. The official report said the fire started in the kitchen. Old wiring. Faulty appliances. Case closed. He lifted another document, faded and creased. "But my father, he didn't believe it. Not after what he saw." Amara stepped closer, drawn by the gravity of long-buried truth. "What did he see?" Kade hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. Signs of forced entry. A broken lock on the back door. An accelerant smell that didn't match the kitchen origin point. And, his voice thinned, footprints in the mud outside. 2 sets. One large. One small. Amara felt the room tilt. "Small. Child-sized," he said. "Smaller than yours would have been at the time." A shiver crawled up her spine. "So there was another child there? Someone else in the house?" "That's what my father believed," Kade said quietly. "And he believed that child was taken before the fire spread." Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. The memories she had suppressed scraped at the edges of her mind. Glimpses of someone beside her in a dark hallway, a whisper to run, a hand pulling away. But the images blurred before she could grasp them fully. "Why would someone take a child?" she whispered. "To make sure the fire did what it was meant to do," Kade replied. "Or to prevent witnesses." He rubbed a hand over his jaw. "My father tried to push the investigation further, but he hit resistance. Reports disappeared. Interviews went unrecorded. Eventually, he was told to let it go." Kade's voice hardened. "He didn't." Amara felt a weight settle in her chest. "So your father investigated off the books?" Kade nodded. "For years. Quietly. He kept journals, photos, notes. After he died, I found everything. That's when I realized, the girl he tried to save grew up to become you." Amara stared at him, throat tight. "And you never told me because—" "Because knowing wouldn't have protected you," he said. "It would have made you a target sooner. And now—" "Now," he said, his eyes darkening, "someone has learned that the truth didn't burn in that house. Someone knows I have my father's files. And someone knows you survived what wasn't meant to leave survivors." The room seemed to shrink around her. "What do they want?" she whispered. Kade stepped closer, not threateningly, but with a gravity that drew her in. "They want to erase the last loose ends. You and me." Amara's pulse thundered. "Why now? Why after all these years?" Kade's gaze softened with something like regret. "Because 2 months ago, someone accessed sealed juvenile records tied to the fire. Someone who shouldn't have been able to. Someone with money, power, and influence." Fear slithered cold through her. "You think it's someone connected to Helix?" "I think," Kade said slowly, "it's someone connected to your past. Someone who knew your family." Amara felt the ground shift beneath every memory she had. She searched Kade's face for certainty, for clarity, for anything resembling solid ground. "Then tell me the truth," she said. "All of it." He exhaled, a long, heavy breath that carried years of silence. "There was a name in my father's notes," he said. "A name he wrote more than any other. A name tied to financial irregularities, threats, blackmail. A man with motive and opportunity." Amara's voice was barely a whisper. "Whose name?" Kade met her eyes, the truth finally breaking through the last barrier. "Your father's business partner," he said. "The one who vanished after the fire." The name hung in the air like a blade suspended mid-fall. Her father's business partner, the man who disappeared without leaving even the courtesy of a ghost. Amara felt the shock ripple through her, but beneath it, something colder stirred, recognition. She had heard that name whispered once in childhood, spoken through clenched teeth during an argument she barely remembered. A shadow in her family's history, never explained, always avoided. Now he returned not as a memory, but as a threat resurrected. Kade watched her carefully. His stillness was no longer stoic professionalism. It was the restraint of someone bracing for fallout. "His name was Lawrence Dray," Kade said softly. "Your father trusted him, invested in him, built a future with him. And then, right before the fire, everything between them fell apart." Amara steadied herself against the table, her fingers brushing the edge of the files. "What happened between them?" "Greed," Kade said simply. "Your father discovered financial discrepancies. Unexplained transfers. Deals signed without approval. Dray was siphoning money through shell companies. Your father confronted him. And 3 days later, your house burned." The bulb above them flickered, briefly dimming the room, casting long shadows across Kade's face. Amara's stomach tightened. "You think Dray burned the house to cover up his fraud?" Kade shook his head. "Not just that. Your father was preparing to go public. If he had, Dray's entire empire would have collapsed. He had everything to lose. But why try to kill a child?" Her voice quivered, anger and disbelief tangled together. "He didn't know you were there," Kade said. "Or, he didn't intend for you to be collateral. My father believed the fire was meant for one target, your father. But the plan spiraled out of control." Amara looked away, her pulse pounding. Memories fluttered like frantic moths, her father shouting into a phone, her mother rushing her upstairs, the smell of gasoline masked by smoke. So many fragments that had never made sense, not until now. Kade stepped closer, his voice grounding her. "Dray vanished right after the fire. No bank activity. No sightings. Nothing. It was as if he stepped off the map." He paused. "Until 6 months ago." Amara's breath caught. 6 months. Kade nodded. "There was a flagged passport check in Eastern Europe under a false name. I didn't know it was him at first. But my father's notes had aliases, old signatures, patterns Dray used when disguising transactions. It matched. Someone found him. Or he resurfaced. And now he's here," she whispered. "He's not in the city," Kade replied. "But someone working for him is. Someone with access, enough to breach your home network, track your movements, infiltrate Astrohelix." The room seemed to contract, pulling her into the gravity of a danger she had never imagined. She crossed her arms, pacing slowly, each step echoing like a countdown. "Kade, why didn't you come to me sooner with all this? Why wait until I was already being targeted?" Kade exhaled, the guilt in his eyes raw, unmasked. "Because I wasn't sure. And I wasn't going to drag you into the past unless I knew it was coming for you. Once the threat started, once the surveillance began, I realized the truth wasn't dormant anymore. Someone wanted it uncovered, or buried." Amara stopped pacing. Her voice softened, though her chest still pulsed with tension. "You've carried this alone for so long." His gaze dropped. "I thought keeping the truth from you would keep you safe. And now? Now the truth is the only thing that can keep you alive." Silence pressed around them. The warehouse creaked under the weight of wind sneaking through the cracked vents. Outside, the night deepened, thick and opaque, as if guarding the secrets that were unraveling inside. Amara moved toward the table. Her hand hovered over the files, then settled on the top one. "Show me everything." Kade hesitated. "Some of what's in there is graphic. Hard to read. I've lived the consequences, she said. I can face the details. Reluctantly, he spread the documents before her. Photographs of the fire's aftermath, pages of his father's handwritten notes, a grainy photo of two children's footprints side by side in the mud. Her chest tightened painfully at the sight. That other set, she whispered, touching the blurred outline. The child who was taken, do you know who it was? Kade's voice softened. No. My father never figured it out. But he believed that child was the key to everything. And now? She asked. I think someone found them, Kade replied. And whoever that person is, they're either working with Dre or being hunted by him. Amara felt the air thicken. So this person, this missing child, could still be alive. Yes, Kade said. Alive, and dangerous to Dre's agenda. She pressed her hands against the table, grounding herself. Then we need to find them. Before he does. Kade nodded. I agree. But there's something you need to understand. His tone shifted, weighted with a truth he had been avoiding. If the child survived, they may not remember what happened. Trauma erases and reshapes. They might not know who they are connected to. Amara lifted her chin. Then we help them remember. Kade hesitated, then opened another file, this one containing financial reports, travel records, and a recent blurry security still. A figure stepping out of a black sedan. Hooded. Unidentifiable. But the timestamp was unmistakable. 3 nights ago. They were near Astra Helix, Kade said. And they weren't alone. A chill swept through her. You think this is connected to the break-in at my property? I know it is, Kade said. Someone tried to retrieve something from that house. Something they thought you had. Amara's breath stilled. But I barely lived there. I barely remember it. That's the point, Kade said. Someone believes you remember more than you think. Suddenly, the anonymous message from earlier, the photo taken inside her office, clicked into place. It wasn't intimidation. It was a warning. Or a reminder. Someone inside the building had access, she said, her voice tightening. Someone close enough to walk past my office without raising suspicion. Kade nodded grimly. An insider. Possibly more than one. Dre had connections in corporate sectors before he vanished. And someone like that, they don't stay gone without support. Amara's pulse quickened. So the threat is closer than even you thought. Close enough to know your schedule, Kade said. Close enough to know when you're vulnerable. The light above them flickered again. And a sound, soft, metallic, echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Kade's posture snapped rigid. He raised a hand, silencing her, eyes narrowing into the shadows beyond the crates. Someone was here. Someone listening. And the truth they'd unearthed had just drawn blood in the dark. The sound, soft, metallic, almost deliberate, rippled through the warehouse and stilled the air. Kade moved before thought could register, stepping in front of Amara, body angled, hand slipping toward the weapon holstered beneath his jacket. The single bulb above them swayed gently, throwing fractured shadows across the concrete floor. For a moment, everything existed in suspended silence, the kind that arrives just before a revelation or a catastrophe. Amara's breath hitched as her eyes scanned the far end of the warehouse. Between stacks of abandoned crates, a figure shifted, barely more than a silhouette. Not rushing. Not panicked. Moving with the confidence of someone familiar with danger. Kade's voice lowered to a razor's whisper. Stay behind me. But Amara, driven by a rising mix of fear and defiance, took a step forward instead. Who's there? Her words echoed, dissolving into the cavernous dark. The figure stepped into the weak pool of light, revealing a young man, no older than 25, tense but not armed, eyes wide with something between terror and determination. His clothes were worn, his hair disheveled, but his posture remained guarded, as though he had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Kade stiffened. Don't move. The young man lifted his hands, palms open. I'm not here to hurt you. His voice, sharp, trembling, cut through Amara with an unexpected familiarity. Not recognition, but resonance, like a chord struck in the distant chambers of memory. Who are you? She demanded. The young man swallowed hard. My name is Jalen. Jalen Dre. Kade's stance faltered, shock flickering across his usually unreadable features. Amara felt her pulse thunder in her ears. Dre, she whispered. You're Lawrence Dre's son? Jalen nodded slowly. I didn't come to threaten you. I came to warn you. Kade's jaw clenched. You expect us to believe that? After everything your father... My father is dead, Jalen cut in, voice cracking. He died 6 months ago. And the people who were hunting him, they're coming for you. The warehouse swallowed his words, leaving the echo of them hanging like smoke. Amara felt the world tilt. Dead, she repeated. But Kade said. I know, Jalen murmured, lowering his hands. He was alive when your threats began. But he's gone now. And he left something behind. Something people are willing to kill for. Kade exchanged a quick, sharp glance with Amara before stepping closer to Jalen, not lowering his guard. Why should we believe anything you say? Jalen's eyes glistened. Because I watched him die. The sentence hit the room like a collapse. He took a shuddering breath. My father wasn't hiding from you. He was hiding from the people who controlled him. The fire, it wasn't his idea. He didn't want to do it. He tried to walk away, and they made an example of him. Amara felt numbness crawl up her arms. Who are they? Jalen shook his head, distressed. I never learned their names. He never told me. Just that they were powerful. Connected. The kind of men who make people disappear. He said your father found out too much. That they needed to erase the trail. They forced him to break into the house and stage the fire. But he swore he never planned for anyone to get hurt. Kade's voice dripped with skepticism. Convenient story. It's the truth, Jalen insisted. I know it won't bring you comfort. But it's all I have. Amara held her breath, searching Jalen's face for deception, but found only grief and desperation. If your father didn't want anyone hurt, then why did he take the other child? The one who vanished. For the first time, Jalen's expression cracked with raw confusion. Other child, he whispered. There was no other child. The room went still. Kade's eyes hardened. Your father took someone that night. A child smaller than Amara. He didn't flee alone. Jalen shook his head violently. No. He told me everything. He swore he acted alone, that he escaped before the house collapsed. Your father lied to you then, Kade said firmly. Jalen's breathing quickened as the revelation hit him like a blow. No, he wouldn't. He wouldn't hide something like that from me. Amara stepped closer, her voice gentle despite the storm inside her. Jalen, if your father didn't take the child, then someone else did. Someone involved with the men who controlled him. The young man sank onto a crate, hands trembling. This is bigger than I thought. Kade remained still, analytical. Why come here tonight? Jalen pulled a folded envelope from his jacket. It was the last thing he left me. A location. Coordinates. He told me to give them to you if anything happened to him. He held the envelope out. Kade snatched it, scanning the contents. His eyes darkened. This location, it's not far. Far from what? Amara asked. Far from where the fire started, Kade murmured. A storage facility your father owned. Amara felt the breath leave her lungs. My father never owned a storage facility. Kade met her gaze. He did. Under a different name. Jalen nodded. My father said, whatever started all this, whatever those men wanted, it's in that storage unit. Kade folded the note, a decision already forming in his stance. We need to move. Now. Amara hesitated, looking at Jalen. You're coming with us. Jalen's eyes widened. Me. You're the only connection we have to your father's last clues, she said. And if those men are after you too, leaving you here is a death sentence. Kade didn't argue. Minutes later, they were back in the SUV, the warehouse fading behind them like the first chapter of a darker journey. The night seemed to hold its breath as they drove, headlights slicing through abandoned industrial roads. The coordinates led them to a lonely storage compound surrounded by chained fences and whispering winds. Kade cut the engine. "Stay behind me," he instructed, stepping out with his weapon drawn. Jalen followed hesitantly, Amara close behind. The compound was silent, too silent. No guards, no lights, just an ocean of locked units stretching in every direction. They reached the numbered unit listed in the envelope. Unit 41. The lock hung broken. Kade raised his weapon. "Someone's already been here." Amara felt dread coil inside her. Then whatever was inside. Her words died as they entered. The unit was empty, except for a single box in the center of the concrete floor. Kade approached slowly. The box was small, wooden, carved with initials she hadn't seen since childhood. AC. Her father's monogram. Amara knelt, opening the lid with trembling hands. Inside was a single object. A photograph. 2 children standing side by side. One was unmistakably her. The other, a boy with dark eyes and disheveled hair. Jalen gasped. Amara's breath shattered. Kade's posture collapsed into stunned realization. The missing child was not a stranger. It was Jalen. He stared at the photograph as if the world had tilted beneath him. I don't remember this," he whispered. "I don't remember any of it." Amara touched the faded image, emotion rising like a tide. "You weren't taken," she said softly. "You survived with him. Your father hid you, because you were a witness." Kade exhaled, the truth settling like dust around them. Dre didn't just run. He ran to protect his son. Jalen's voice trembled. "And the people who controlled him, they'll come for me next." "No," Amara said, rising to her feet with a steadiness born from years of surviving the impossible. "They'll come for all of us. But they won't win." Kade looked at her, truly looked at her, with something like reverence. "Then we fight." Amara gazed at the photograph one last time before closing the box. Her past had not returned to destroy her. It had returned to be reclaimed. When they stepped back into the night, 3 shadows moved as one, bound not by blood, but by truth. And for the first time in decades, the fire that shaped her life no longer consumed her. It illuminated the path ahead.